This past weekend, the Chicago Bears secured the number 1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft after they lost to the Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans defeated the Indianapolis Colts. With the Bears getting the first pick, this shakes things up because it isn't exactly clear what the Bears will do with their first selection. They could stay at number 1 and pick the top player on their board, or they can trade back and get a lot of draft capital in return. Today, I'll break down how the Chicago Bears got the number 1 overall pick in the first place and what they might do with it, because they have a huge decision to make, and whatever they decide to do with it could change the direction of their franchise. Heading into the final week of the season, the Chicago Bears were slated to have the second worst record in the league. They had a chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, but it would have taken them losing to the Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans beating the Indianapolis Colts. The Chicago Bears did their part, losing to the Vikings by double digits. However, it was still likely that the Texans were going to lose to the Colts to secure the number 1 overall pick. Luckily for the Bears, that's not what happened. Near the end of the Texans-Colts game, the Texans were down 7 with one final drive to go to potentially tie up the game. Their final drive was insane, as they converted a 4th and 12 and then scored a touchdown on 4th and 20 to bring the game within 1 point. The Texans then decided to go for 2, and they got it, giving them the lead. They would go on to win the game, and because the Bears lost and the Texans won, the Chicago Bears secured the number 1 overall pick, despite the odds being totally against that. Now let's talk about 3 things I think the Chicago Bears are most likely to do with the top pick, and let's start out by talking about them trading the pick. I think the Chicago Bears are most likely going to trade the number 1 overall pick, because this draft features a couple of very good quarterback prospects, and the Bears are not necessarily a quarterback-needy team. They have a talented young quarterback in Justin Fields, so they don't have to take a quarterback, and instead, they can trade back, get some draft capital, and still get one of the top guys in the draft. I think the most likely scenario is that the Bears will trade back to number 4 with the Colts, and the Colts will jump up to take Bryce Young, and being at number 4 still gives the Bears a chance to take a guy like Will Anderson Jr. or Jalen Carter. According to most analysts, these 2 players are 2 of the top 3 players in the draft, and I think the Bears would take one of those guys at number 1 anyway, so trading back, getting draft capital, and still getting one of your top guys is a very smart move. Another reason why trading back makes so much sense for the Bears is because they have a lot of holes on their roster, and having a lot of draft picks gives them a chance to fill those holes with young, talented players on cheap contracts. Honestly, the draft isn't an exact science. You kind of have to get really lucky to hit on your picks, so getting more picks, getting more swings at the plate is very smart, and the Bears are in a position to do that. Now let's talk about what they will likely do if they decide to stay put at number 1. I've talked about why I think the Chicago Bears are likely going to trade the number 1 overall pick. However, there is a chance that they just stay at number 1 and take the top guy on their board. Let's say they think Will Anderson Jr. or Jalen Carter is a superstar and they don't want to risk losing the opportunity of picking one of them. If they feel that way about either one of those guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they just stayed at number 1 and took one of them. Now, I think that wouldn't be the smartest move because I don't think you should be too confident in your evaluation of prospects. Like I said earlier, the draft isn't an exact science. You have to get lucky to hit on your picks. Nevertheless, I could see the Chicago Bears sticking at number 1 and not missing out on the opportunity to draft their guy. To close out this video, I want to talk about a decision I think the Bears could make, but not a lot of people are talking about, and that's the decision to draft a quarterback. Now, Bears fans, don't get upset. I'm not suggesting you should take a quarterback. I'm just saying there is a possibility that you will, and here's why. Although the Bears have a talented young quarterback in Justin Fields, I think there is reason to be concerned about his development. Right now, he is one of the most electric rushing quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think his mobility gives him a solid floor. However, through 2 seasons, he's been pretty bad as a passer, and I'm really worried about this part of his game. I get that Justin Fields has a terrible supporting cast. I totally understand that. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears looked at the fact that Fields hasn't really progressed as a passer and decided to move on from him. I know that sounds crazy, but I think it could happen. If the Bears do the unexpected and take a quarterback, I think they'll stay at number 1 and take one of 3 guys: Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Will Levis. If they decided to move on from Justin Fields, I think they would most likely pick Bryce Young because he is most similar to Justin Fields in terms of athleticism. However, I wouldn't be too surprised if the Bears decided to draft Will Levis because every draft analyst seems to love Levis, and apparently scouts will too. Bears fans, I know that hurts to hear, but I think there is some chance that y'all end up taking Will Levis at number 1. I don't think it's highly likely, but I want to prepare y'all for that scenario. If I were the Bears GM, I probably wouldn't draft a quarterback, but I do think it makes sense because if you don't think Justin Fields is that star caliber quarterback, I think taking another swing at the position is completely fine and makes sense. It is very important to get the quarterback position right, and if you don't think Justin Fields is the guy, you need to move on from him. Also, if the Bears take a quarterback at number 1, they could end up trading Justin Fields for a lot of draft capital. I think a lot of teams will be interested in Fields, and the Bears could get a lot for him. Although I don't think the Chicago Bears will move on from Justin Fields and draft a quarterback at number 1, I think there are reasons why it makes sense. I probably wouldn't do it, but I think it's more sensible than people realize. Now that the Chicago Bears have the number 1 overall pick, I think this makes the draft way more interesting. Before, it seemed like a guarantee that the Texans would end up drafting Bryce Young at number 1, but now we don't know what's going to happen at the top of the draft. Maybe the Bears stay at number 1 and take Will Anderson Jr. or Jalen Carter. Maybe they trade back to a QB-needy team. Or maybe they take a quarterback themselves. I think all 3 of these scenarios could happen, and I'm very excited to see what the Bears decide to do with their top pick. Hopefully they make the right decision because whatever they do could change the direction of their franchise. Thank you for watching this video. Check out my channel for more content just like this, and subscribe so you never miss an upload.